Sound is ready. Makeup ready. All right. Action. Greetings, Starfighter. You have been See, this is why I can't make movies. Greetings, Starfighter. You have been recruited by the Starlite to defend the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada.
Okay. Okay, ready? In 1, 2.
We'll just do the bop-a-da-bop part. We won't do the main theme.
No, I'll do the...
Okay. And action. Greetings, Starfighter. You have been recruited by the Starlite to defend the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada. I can't do this part. Okay. And scene. Hi, I'm Dan. This is my bro John. We're here to talk about The Last Starfighter. And you'll say to yourself, why would these guys talk about this movie? You know why? Because nobody's talking about this movie. And it's a great film. 1984 was a great year for movies. And a lot of people say when it comes to the 80s, 82 is it. Okay, you have Blade Runner, you got Poltergeist, E.T., The Thing is great. Tootsie is one of our favorites since we were kids. That movie is great.
Great movie.
Edward Kimberly. But my favorite year of the 80s has to be 1984. We've got Spinal Tap, The Terminator, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Star Trek 3. We are Klingons!
We are Klingons!
Great film. Buckaroo Banzai.
I have had enough.
We're going to do a Star Trek 3 episode tonight. I can feel it. Yeah. I've had 2 cups of coffee. John's had 3 cups maybe.
I think so.
And we're ready to go. What about Gremlins?
Gremlin. Ding, 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 ding.
Yes, Jerry Goldsmith's music. We're going to get a copyright strike. It'll be my 3rd one. After the 3rd copyright strike, they're going to take us off of YouTube.
Wait, you had a copyright strike?
I had a copyright strike because I did a stupid music video years ago, and I used a song by Supergrass. Who listens to Supergrass except me? They suck. And I got a copyright strike for that. This was like 10 years ago when I had Ring and Run, where the dog was chasing my friends around. We got a copyright strike for that. But I'm like, people actually care about a Supergrass song. And the other one was the one where the dog was asleep and she was dreaming. And there was an Otis Redding song on the TV that you couldn't even hear, but somebody recognized it as an Otis Redding tune that just happened to be on the TV. And I got a little thing for that, but it is what it is. Also in 1984, we had Blood Simple, the first Coen Brothers movie. These guys were great right out of the gate. They haven't been great since Brother Where Art Thou. That was their last great film, but that's a podcast for another time. Pope of Greenwich Village.
Pope of Greenwich Village?
Shut my thumbs! The Pope of Greenwich Village is awesome, and you gotta see it. It's great. Eric Roberts, Mickey Rourke, Daryl Hannah, when she was at her most Daryl Hannah. She was also in Splash that year, which we both saw in the theaters. I saw the movie Splash when I was 5 years old, and I loved it. I haven't seen it probably since, and it would probably be weird to see it now. Yeah. Starman is a great film from John Carpenter. John Carpenter went out on a limb. He went a little outside of the box, and Starman is one of his best films. I love Amadeus. Yes, the theatrical cut of Amadeus, not the director's cut. Unfortunately, it's only can only get the theatrical cut of Amadeus if you have one of those flippers. Back in the early days of DVD, I'm talking about 1997, kids.
And Mark Hamill originally played him on Broadway.
He did play him, I think, on Broadway on stage, and
so they found Tom Hulce, I think. Right?
Tom Hulce did the movie because I think Milos Forman or some people allegedly were afraid that he was too well known as Luke Skywalker. But I wonder what it would have been like with Mark Hamill. It would have been pretty interesting.
Really interesting.
And then a great film, the first superhero from New Jersey. The Toxic Avenger. It's hard to imagine Toxic Avenger came out in 84, but it did. And Avenge Me! Red Dawn. Wolverines! Came out in 1984 as one of the first PG-13 rated films. But we're not talking about Red Dawn or The Pope of Greenwich Village or Star Trek 3. We're talking about a movie that's not as good as any of those. The Last Starfighter, which is a movie we love. It's definitely a favorite of ours. It's not a guilty pleasure. I think it's straight up pleasure. It's great.
It's great.
It's fun. It has, you know what this movie has that a lot of movies don't have today? That's why I don't want to remake or a sequel to this film.
No.
It's got so much heart and so much love.
And innocence. Well,
Yeah.
except maybe for the Playboys.
Oh, that was...
Yolanda, baby.
Those were real. The kid that was reading those, he was
Those
10
were
years old, and according to conventions, and the people have asked him at the conventions, they didn't give him a magazine with blacked out pictures or just the cover. He opened those pages, and that was that. Now,
It's better than Disney today. I'm just going to say.
Modern
Anyway.
Disney. Oh, please. I just saw Love and Thunder. They should have called it Love and Thunderdome. So I would have known that I was walking into the worst installment of the Thor series.
I didn't even see Love and Thunder yet, but
God.
From what I've heard,
It was woke AF.
Compare that to a movie. Now, of course, in movies today with $200 million they spent on it, you could have all the great special effects and stuff, but you can't compare it to the innocence and the heart of a movie like Last Starfighter. You just can't.
The simplicity. The simplicity.
I would say, and we could talk about this later, but it's like, instead of a sequel, instead of a reboot, instead of a remake, we've seen what happened with Star Wars and all these things went off in different directions.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to, bash Disney Star Wars right now. I'm just, we'll save that for another time.
Go right ahead.
But,
but what I will say
is,
if
you want to do something with Last Starfighter, do a special edition, because I think one thing that now I thought the special effects are great in the original Star Wars, but of course George Lucas wants to tinker with stuff and everything. But I think a great example of a special edition is when they did a special edition for the original Star Trek series. Mm-hmm. And when I see that on TV, and I'm like, I like those little enhancements. They don't change the story, they don't change the characters or anything like that. But when they show the Enterprise flying through, they show the different things. It's more enhanced special effects, and I think they should do that with Last Starfighter. And then when you release it, give us both versions. Give us the 1980s version so people can compare.
I don't
back and forth. I think that would be the best thing. As much as I'd love to see Lance Guest again, and Catherine Mary Stewart, I saw her in a recent interview. She still looks great. I mean, I mean, if you want to do that, as much as I'd like to see the characters in a sequel, if they made a sequel today, it would just be. It would be like
he pitched the Hollywood.
It's like it would be like. Think of what happened, what they did with Luke Skywalker, and think about what they did with James Bond. Think about what they're probably going to do with Indiana
Bond
Jones.
Movie.
I just, you know what it is? It's like, I'm tired of seeing them do this to my beloved franchises. They did it to everything. Everything. Star Trek. But the thing about Star Trek that's different is that you could always do alternate universes. You could always do time travel things.
They're doing it now. Every time they...
With James Bond, it's like if you kill off the character, you kill off the character. With Star Wars, it's numbered series. So it's like, the last image that we're going to have of Luke Skywalker is not, him with all his friends in Return of the Jedi, that like, we're going to start a new republic, and we're going to start, things like that. The last thing you're going to think of him is him drinking green milk from the Space Camp.
Well, that's not entirely fair.
But
I like
anyway,
The Last Jedi a lot.
But it's like, I think Last Starfighter, if they made a sequel today... Yeah, probably wouldn't.
No, what it would be.
And if they made the movie today, like if Last Starfighter was never made, they made the movie today, like I was saying, they'd kill Alex Roganoff in the middle of the film. Centauri would go back and tell Maggie, it's like, you were really the real Starfighter all along. Yeah. And even though you were just watching Alex play the game, you didn't have to play the game. Just like Rey in Star Wars, she didn't have to really train. She just,
turned out to be related.
She's the best ever.
She related to people that she should have never been related to. And I think it should have just been a miracle of the Force. Like, Anakin Skywalker was born of the Force, and he just had the power.
Born of the Force.
But, that's neither here nor there. But
enough about those movies. Let's get back to
talking about 1984 when movies were good. And we had movies like, you can go watch a movie like Footloose, which I've never seen, or several others.
Which I've never seen.
I didn't see Secret Honor. I didn't see Purple Rain. Are you sure Purple Rain was 84, not 85?
I gotta double check that.
I'm gonna double check. 85. I still gotta see that movie. I love Prince.
Purple Rain.
Great musician. No, we're gonna get a copyright. They're gonna kill us for that one. They want to take me off YouTube for Supergrass. Nick Castle directed The Last Starfighter, and if you guys haven't watched our videos, we tend to go off on tangents. Nick Castle directed The Last Starfighter. For those of you that don't know, he was the Shape in Halloween. The only scene where he's not Michael Myers is when the mask gets pulls off, and it's the girl from Happy Days, her brother, Tony Moran, for like 2 seconds, where he has the weird-looking face. Like, he played Michael Myers, but most of Michael Myers walking around was Nick Castle. And he was a friend of John Carpenter's, and he started directing too.
Joni's brother?
Joni from the show. turned out to be her brother, strangely enough. From what I heard, I'm not confirming this. Don't come here for the facts, because a lot of old facts and a lot of just flying off the cuff. But he always liked musicals, Nick Castle, and I think that led to the casting of Robert Preston as Centauri, who's sort of a, kind of a businessman. I like that it was a futuristic movie, but that he wore a fedora, and he had this cool bow tie, and he got this coat, and he was
the bow tie.
He had class, He's one of those people, like on the brilliant Arrow release, which I will hold up here, of The Last Starfighter. They talked about how he was an actor, sort of like almost like Ricardo Montalban, where he's just so cool.
Well, he was like a character. He was basically like his character that he played in The Music Man. And I just saw The Music Man a few years ago with my wife. And it's really a fun movie, like if you like those old-time musicals and everything.
See it.
And the thing about it, he played like a salesman type of thing, like pitching this thing. And what's so great about him in The Last Starfighter is that he's basically pitching the idea for the movie. That, they're just really, they were really trying to do a lot of different things with special effects back then, with CGI and everything. But the thing to me that stands out in Last Starfighter the most, and we'll get to the other characters later, but somebody like, like these older actors, and you saw this a lot in the 1980s, because in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of young actors coming up and everything like that, the Pacinos, the De Niros.
Yeah.
But now you started to see in the 80s, a lot of old-time actors coming into the thing.
Yeah.
And not to bring everything back to Star Wars, but a lot of that started with, somebody like George Lucas putting Alec Guinness and Peter Cushing and some of these old-time actors in Star Wars and everything. So a whole new generation found out who Alec Guinness was and went back to see Bridge on the River Kwai and all these great movies, and Lawrence of Arabia and all these other
David
things.
Lean films.
But and the great thing about him, he's a pitchman. With Robert Preston, and he pitches the movie basically to Alex and to the audience, and he's so believable that certain things that may stretch your imagination a little bit, may stretch certain things, you believe it because he does it with such conviction, such passion.
Yeah,
so
great. And I like
one
the
of the
idea.
one of the best casting choices, I think.
It was great because you know what? I didn't know who he was, and then years later I saw him in other movies. I never saw the Music Man. One of my favorite movies introduced to us by Chris Bly was the film S.O.B. by Blake Edwards. Robert Preston is in. He's shockingly great in that movie. And that movie is one of my favorites. And that was a movie that got horrible reviews. It came out in 1980. Leonard Maltin gave it bomb. Gave it 0. He also that was another thing about Leonard Maltin. Now I love Leonard Maltin. His podcast is great. 2 stars for Taxi Driver. And he gave 2, people still give him crap for that. He gave Taxi Driver 2 stars. And he gave Laser Blast 2.5. So people say 2.5 stars for Laser Blast, like when they see him and stuff at different events, and I think that's hilarious. And yeah, he famously did not like that movie, but check out S.O.B. It's a great movie from Blake Edwards, director of the Pink Panther. So basically, originally in the script, it was going to be in tract houses, not a trailer park. It was going to be in your usual Spielbergia situation, like Poltergeist or E.T. or Close Encounters. And Spielberg was brilliant, though, because when he cut onto that niche in the 70s, really Close Encounters was the first. Not so much Jaws, because it took place on an island. But Close Encounters was the beginning of Spielberg just taking this look at suburban American life that was not being seen in the movies of the 70s, as great as they were. And we love Marathon Man, The Godfather, and all these films, but he was really giving us a window into our neighborhoods. Like when we watched E.T. or The Goonies, and even though it took place in California, or in the Goonies case, it was Oregon, this felt like my neighborhood. These looked like my friends, and this looked like the bus we all rode to school together, and the different kids from different age groups, and the way kids interacted. It was very interesting, but the trailer park thing really got me because this is a kid that is really desperate. Like, this is a kid that really needs to get out. You figure Elliot, if he never met E.T., like, he'd probably grow up. He'd do all right. He'd do okay. But, like, with Alex in this movie, it seems like there's a real yearning to get away and a real desperation. Because, like, I used to watch Star Wars, and I used to look at Luke Skywalker, and I'm like, is it so bad with Owen and Beru? I mean, I know he wants to get away.
And milk.
But, well, it didn't seem like he was really... They were really making it that hard for him. It wasn't like Alex, you got to fix my not computer, my plumbing. You got to fix my electric. Alex, you got to do this. Alex, you got to do that. And he never was, sorry, Luke Skywalker, but he was never a whiner. He never wanted to go to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters. No, he was just, oh, but that's going to take all day if I have to do that. And even though this film is compared a lot to Star Wars, and I know that there are a lot of comparisons, but Star Wars, people don't realize, is extremely derivative.
Yeah.
But nobody was like a film nerd when Star Wars came out. Like, when Star Wars came out, nobody was saying, oh, it's just a ripoff of The Hidden Fortress and all these Sergio Leone films and this film and that film. See, Lucas was brilliant in a way that he ripped off so many great movies and great genres in one package that had never been put in that package before. And that was smart. He'd never used the science fiction vehicle to use the westerns and the samurai films and things like that. Yeah. So The Last Starfighter, unfortunately, because it's also a science fiction movie. Yeah. If you look at the Dam Busters and then look at Star Wars, the dogfight scenes, you're like, ooh, very close. Yeah. And he actually used some of that footage when he showed the assembly cut to Spielberg, De Palma, and all those guys. And that went pretty well for the most part. But basically, the whole act structure of basically he passes this test. He takes this video game, and I like the idea that it's a video game. The writer, John Betuel, was reading The Once and Future King, and he wanted to make it like the Excalibur test. Like the video game was a test to find a starfighter who could do it. Not like today's movies where people are already good at everything.
And I just noticed too, don't want to interrupt, but if you look at the Starfleet logo, it's the sword with the wings on it. So
there's a lot of stuff about
Future King, Excalibur, and everything. That anyone from anywhere.
And Centauri has like a Merlin where he's good at what he does and he's very smart, but you could tell there's something about him that he's a little bit shady too. Yeah. And that's the thing, that if you read that book, especially the early chapters, by the way, it's on my summer reading, and I promised you guys I'd finish The Once and Future King before summer is over, and I'm 500 pages behind. I've read the first 100 and it's great. But if you read that book, Merlin, especially early on, is a bit of a trickster. And he's cool and everything and he cares, but he's a bit of, he kind of plays with them a little. But then he passes the test. He's recruited to the Star League. He goes there and meets all these weird aliens.
And really, the game that, when he's playing the game and winning and everything, that happens in about 15 minutes into the film. So this movie moves very fast.
Yeah,
it's when I saw it again recently, I realized, I'm like, wow, this movie is only about an hour and 40 minutes.
Sure.
So 15 minutes, he's already playing the game. And what I liked about it, too, is because we would experience that in our life. When we were kids, we'd go to the arcade, we'd see people. It was like a community thing. And I think what's interesting about it, we'll get right back to the movie, but I think what's interesting about it is that you have these, it was like a community experience. Like when people saw you playing the game and you're all, people were all around. And then it went, to the console and everybody was at home. But now what you do is that people go online, they do the live streaming and everything like that, or they go to these different websites. A
community again.
And it's become like a community thing again, which I think is very interesting because there was, we'll get into talking about the culture later, but the culture of video games is that, years ago people would say, oh, you're just wasting your time with it. You're just wasting your time. But this story, the premise of the story, and I'm surprised that it wasn't remade years later, because the premise of the story is very interesting, that it says, what if one of these video games is going to be that stepping stone for you to go into the galaxies, into the stars? And
there was not a remake, but there was a book by Ernest Cline who wrote Ready Player One.
Ready Player One, yeah.
He wrote a book called Armada, which is totally The Last Starfighter, but it's an online game. That's the only difference. But it's very similar to The Last Starfighter. And they never made a movie out of it because I've read the book. It's all right, Ready Player One I thought was a good book.
Have Grig or
there's no Grig. But,
we'll get to Grig later.
Yeah, Grig is the best. But we'll get there. This is not going to be a short video, folks.
Oh, no.
Put the kids to bed because we're going to be on here all night.
To bed.
But, no, you know what, though?
Mostly movies. Mostly after dark.
Yeah. Oh, God. No. But, no, you know what it is? It's like, I feel with, what is it? Ready Player One and all that, I like the premise. I like a lot of it, but a lot of it, as for the movie, the only thing I really loved in that film was the Shining stuff, which was not in the book. Like
Very
Spielberg made that up for the film, and it's fantastic. But then there's a lot of stuff in the movie that annoys me too.
I guess a tribute to Kubrick. You know?
It is. Spielberg has always been very nice to Kubrick and Kubrick's memory, and The Shining is a movie that's controversial, and a lot of people are mixed on it because movie people love it for the most part, and book people are like, well, the book, blah blah. But you know what? It's like
I was trying. Speaking of Kubrick for a second, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I was trying to watch Dr. Strangelove again. I couldn't finish.
Really?
No, the reason why it's so much like today's world.
It's a documentary.
I can't even look at this. I says, no, forget it. I got to put it down for a second. I'll get back to it later. But that's why and it's a fantastic movie.
I recently got the 4K.
Ever, but I couldn't, I couldn't, I'm like, this is too much like our world today. I can't. And it's like,
Too
you know,
much.
the movie was made during the height of the Cold War.
Oh my God.
And I'm like looking at this today and I'm like, I can't. It's just
saw
too
the
much
movie.
for me, right?
Dad showed us that movie. I was, I think, 12 or 11.
I'm like, that's why I'm
what
talking
the hell
about
is
like
this
Last
movie?
Starfighter and stuff. I says I can't see those serious movies anymore. I can't.
But my dad promised me I didn't get it, Dr. Strangelove. I saw it about 12. I'm like, what? But he says, yo, in a couple of years you'll like it.
And when we saw it on that
literally, we
class,
saw it 10 years later. We were in a screenwriting class together with Ed Pomerantz was teaching. And we were sitting there watching it in a screenwriting class, and we loved it. I'm like, this movie's great. It's my favorite Kubrick film, much as I love 2001 and pretty much all his movies. Dr. Strangelove is amazing. Check it out. Seek it out. The 4K from Sony is beautiful.
And another Star Wars connection,
great.
James Earl Jones in it.
James Earl Jones is in it, but do you know that there's a Last Starfighter connection to Dr. Strangelove? There's a scene after the briefing, which we were just talking about.
Yeah.
See,
We'll get right back to it.
The briefing.
Circle back.
Let's circle back. The briefing with the aliens. As Alex Rogan is walking away from there's an announcement that says, underneath you'll find your starfighters, you'll find your... And he's like basically saying all the things they have in their kit, which is what was from Dr. Strangelove when Slim Pickens, I believe it was explaining that to them. So that was fun. And basically Alex is like, no, I'm out. I'm not doing this. I didn't know it was a test. And Centauri takes him back. And there's a beautiful scene that you were talking about before when he says, did Chris Columbus not sail the ocean or something like that? I'm paraphrasing. Oh, yeah. And he says, what's his name? I don't know. I can't remember the line.
Yeah, I just saw it, but it was like...
But what did he say? He says, I'm from a trailer park. I'm not Christopher Columbus. I'm not any of those guys. And what does Centauri say?
Oh, he says, if that's what you think, then that's all you'll ever be. Great line.
Heady stuff. We didn't do first time we saw the movie. We rented it from Video Image. Video Image was a small video store, rest in peace, on Staten Island back in the 80s. It was walking distance from our house. We used to walk up to the corner sometimes and rent a G.I. Joe tape, and it was great. It was like a family-run video. You guys that talk about missing Blockbuster, Blockbuster my butt. Hollywood Video was where it's at. We all know that Hollywood Video was a million times better than Blockbuster. 5-day rentals before Blockbuster ever had 5-day rentals. For chains,
I worked at Blockbuster and he worked at...
I worked at McDonald's across the street, but then I eventually worked at Hollywood Video years later. But, you know, I did like Blockbuster, but what you kids will never know is that before Blockbuster, before Hollywood Video, and before Palmer Video, which was the first big chain in New York that I remembered, we had these little mom and pop video stores, and they were awesome. And you knew the owner, and he was a friend. And, you know, you'd rent the tape. Tapes used to be one day, pay $3. Then you had to return it until like 5 p.m. the next day. Otherwise, you get charged another $3. So not everything was cheaper in the 80s. But I remember walking to Video Image. We rented Back to the Future. We rented Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Goonies, Gremlins, all these great films that were such a big part of our childhood. And still, even as an adult, I saw Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I wish you could have been there at the Marquee a few weeks ago in Toms River, New Jersey. The Marquee Cinemas of Toms River, New Jersey. Every Wednesday and Sunday and Wednesday, they play a classic film. And I saw Temple of Doom there, and it was just... I loved it more this time than I have like in years. And I always love it, and I even love the beautiful 4Ks I got last year. But I'm watching it again, and I'm like, why does this feel like a brand new movie? It's such a beautiful, it's such a great movie that it's like every time you watch it, especially on the big screen. This is the thing about Indiana Jones films or great films of that period, is that you can watch them on video at any time. You can watch it on Paramount Plus. But when you see an Indiana Jones film in the theater, it's like seeing it for the first time. It's like you're actually getting really caught up in the excitement as if you're seeing it for the first time. And that's the power of great cinema. Godfather's another one of those. Like, if you guys have seen Godfather a million times on video, I'm dying to get the 4Ks.
Rest in peace, James Caan.
Rest in peace, Jimmy Caan. I love him so much.
He's so good in that movie. I was seeing it again recently because they were playing. Because I think they were doing the Godfather Coda or something.
Yeah, because I watched The Offer recently, which I
saw
loved.
1 and 2 again, and I'm just...
You see him in the...
just so good.
You see him in the theater, though, it's a new experience. And I didn't know if that was true. And then we had seen it at AMC Empire, I think in the early 2000s. They had just opened in New York, and they were showing the Godfather movies, and we watched the first Godfather. I'm like, this is amazing. You know, I'd love to see that in the theater.
I think 3 things. We had those old video stores. Uncle John, remember?
Yeah, my grandma's uncle used to, how do we get around
make
this?
Videos for, like, some of these old movies.
Okay, he used to bootleg videos. He would go to RKO Video in Coney Island. Don't look for it. It's not there. Rest in peace, RKO. Okay. My mom's uncle would copy tapes for us because he always felt...
Those are great old movies.
Well, he felt it was a shame that, they were asking families in the 1980s to pay $30, $40 for a VHS tape. And he felt it was a crime that we hadn't seen certain Disney movies because sometimes we didn't have the money to go to the re-release. And the re-release of Fantasia or something would only be out for a week. Mm-hmm. So he used to copy some tapes for us. But don't worry, Disney. Everything that has ever been copied for us has been purchased, and it's behind this wall. It's in the other wing of the Siri Video Library.
But he also did movies like Ben-Hur, Shane,
Yeah.
Great old...
The tape, we had one tape with Empire and Jedi. We used to watch that tape over and over again. He would do it in long play. And we could watch, one tape had, the Apple Dumpling Gang and Star Wars. And we'd always fast forward the Apple Dumpling Gang to watch Star Wars. And then we watched the Empire and Jedi tape. There would be sometimes we wouldn't even mess with Star Wars. And we would just go a couple of days.
It was like a grindhouse. You have the bad movie and then you have the good movie.
Yeah. It was, like the old days of the double features. Like you'd go see Star Wars at the drive-in and then the second feature would be Buck Rogers, which I believe our brother Tom went to see.
Yeah.
He went to and then I think he went to one where it was Jaws and Star Wars. Mm-hmm. But Star Wars played first and then Jaws was coming on later and they were a little scared of Jaws because they were kids. They were 6 or 7. And I mean now, if somebody would play a double feature of Star Wars and Jaws, I would drop everything. I would I would walk out of work and I'm going to see Jaws and Star Wars. Sorry,
I saw it in the drive-thru, Star Wars: A New Hope,
82,
and
with the trailer.
I remember they had the trailer for
Revenge of the Jedi. Yeah.
But anyway,
so we've got to do this more often. I'm so bored when I do this alone. I love you all. I love my audience, and I love reviewing movies. And you're going to love my videos coming up where I talk about the new Elvis movie and Elvis by John Carpenter, and which one is better. I'll let you know. And I'm going to talk about Thor, Love and Thunder and a few other things too, but it's so much fun to do this with guests, with friends. It's great.
I love it.
And where were we?
Last Starfighter came out a year after Return of the Jedi. And so that's where we pick off again. Where... Then,
today, a lot of movies in the 80s that you think would have had sequels immediately, hits, Gremlins, Ghostbusters, things like that, would have probably had a sequel 2 years later. In the 80s, though, it was a little different. They didn't really jump on the whole sequel thing. We had the Star Wars sequels. We had a few James Bond movies in the 80s. Less said about those mid-80s James Bonds, like A View to a Kill.
Yeah.
I do like Honest Pussy. I do like For Your Eyes Only, I really like. And I love the Tim Dalton ones. But
Timothy Dalton, I think he would have been better. Watch him in The Rocketeer, another great movie, which we'll probably cover.
Great film. Oh, we got to do that one.
It's a great movie.
You know why? Because nobody talks about The Rocketeer.
He plays a great villain. Yeah.
But we got to do
Nobody talks about The Rocketeer.
When we talk about Rocketeer, we got to do a double. We got to do Rocketeer and Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
Dick Tracy is a movie.
I saw it again recently. I loved it. Oh my God, I forgot
brilliant.
It is so
film.
good. Big Boy did it.
Big Boy did it. Big Boy did it.
Big Boy did it.
Big Boy did it. But
Big boy did it.
Big boy did
Big
it.
boy did
Big boy did it. Yeah, big boy did it.
Big boy did it.
He definitely did it. Oh, they did it. Wait, that's Harry Met Sally.
If you're not for the people,
you can't buy the people. Lincoln. Oh, this is going to disturb many of you on YouTube. This is going to be like video drama. I think people will see this and just
Timothy Dalton, I thought, would be a better Bond villain than Bond himself. Well, he was good as Bond.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he'd be a better Bond villain, and then of
Isn't
course,
he amazing in Flash
Bond
Gordon?
really came back with GoldenEye.
He's so great in Flash Gordon.
Yeah, he's great in Flash Gordon.
So good.
But you know who I love in Flash Gordon? Gordon's alive.
Gordon's alive. Brian Blessed. Oh God, I love him so
Bless
much.
that man.
Listen to read Brian Blessed's autobiography. What's the name of it? Can't remember. But there's snippets of it on YouTube. Look up Brian Blessed on YouTube. Brian Blessed. He's Boss Nass in Star Wars. You kids would know him best as, you know, the Planet Core and everything. And then you see him in interviews, and he's such a funny guy and such a cool guy. You see him in other movies, and you're like, George Lucas, what were you doing, man? You had the best guy in this movie. Is the best actor you have in this whole movie.
He's like Jack Black times 10. It's like,
he's
he's so awesome.
You know, he punched a polar bear once.
He punched a polar bear once.
It was a polar bear broke through his campsite and was going to attack him. It was coming through the tent, and he just goes, and he punched the polar bear in the face. The polar bear ran. Like, that's pretty cool. A man who could knock out a polar bear is pretty cool.
Oh my God! How do we get back to Last Starfighter after that?
I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to get back to Last Starfighter. I think we're drifting in space.
But now
like
he's
2001
in
guy.
Yeah, 2001.
But he
now
doesn't
he's in
want to
space
do it.
and he meets the guys. So.
And he meets the aliens, and he wants to go back home, basically. So he says, "I'm done with this." And we talked about Centauri takes him home, and then there wasn't a lot of sequels back in those days. And then what happens is he realizes that he's being attacked by bounty hunters on Earth that are sent by Zur, who's the ultimate villain. Zur was once one of the people of Rylos, but he turned on Rylos. He teamed up with the Kodan Armada, which are a bunch of wrinkly-faced, aliens, sort of like Klingons in some ways. That's the thing. Yeah. This film had very good production design. The mythology was there.
The makeup was great.
It was really there.
Practical effects.
And basically, he returns. We die. But then what happens is then they're sending out Hit Beast.
He goes back.
The Zandozan, the interstellar Hit Beast, is trying to kill Alex Rogan. But there's a robot on Earth that's taking his place, so people don't wonder where Alex is gone. Which doesn't really make sense. Like, if he was missing for a day or two, I don't think it would be a big deal. But the idea was he was probably going to be gone a long time fighting this war, which is over in 2 seconds, basically. We'll wait for them to pass by, and then we'll shoot at the turret, and that's it.
Hide and go seek.
It was pretty simple. It's like a small thermal exhaust port right below the main port, more or less.
But I think the key to the space fighting scenes is the
Death Blossom.
Death Blossom.
Oh, that was cool. That's a weapon of last resort. We haven't talked about Grig. Let's talk about Grig.
In theory.
Grig is an awesome character. The makeup job is really cool. Again, Rob Cobb's designs were great. Rob Cobb was a production designer who also designed Conan the Barbarian, one of our favorites. Ooh, we gotta do that one. Conan the Barbarian, and he was in the art department, uncredited, on Star Wars. He worked on the Indiana Jones art department, and he worked with Jim Cameron on Aliens. And I think he had something to do with the first Alien, maybe the art conceptual design. Yeah. Great job with the production design, and
I think some of his designs for Alien they used in Last Starfighter.
Oh, okay.
The design for the gunship and different things. I mean,
that's pretty cool.
It really does have. I mean, looking at the gunship again, it really has a cool design to it. It's just really, really well designed. And
we're going to jump around again too, because I realized that my notes are even out of order, because stuff I was going to have at the end was in the middle, but. That's Star Wars started in the middle, but it turned out okay.
One of my favorite characters, and then seeing it again, because there's certain things you remember about a movie. There's certain scenes that are so memorable in Last Starfighter, but sometimes you forget. But sometimes you forget certain lines, like when Grig says, "I have a wife and 6,000 Griglings
children."
I'm like, he's got. I got to start calling him Notorious Grig. I mean, he's just like
he's a pimp. Sure,
he's definitely.
Spaceman. You know, I was practicing that laugh, not to talk, but I was practicing that laugh this week and seeing if I could get it. Nothing near as good as yours. Did you ever play the video game for the NES? Yes, the NES, because there was never an arcade game that went past the prototype phase, and the game that was supposed to be the Last Starfighter Atari 2600 became the game Solaris, which I tried to play last night. No. And then I played... Solaris is a great movie, the original. You know, the George Clooney one isn't bad either. That's another podcast. What was that? I did play the NES one last night.
Interstellar.
I couldn't get... Interstellar was great. I couldn't get past the first level of the Last Starfighter on the NES. He does.
Yeah, Interstellar.
I could not get past the first level of that game on the NES, but it was nice to hear the theme in 8-bit, which is pretty cool. Oh, yeah. It's great. But then the film had gained this cult following, and it got an uptick. The cult following got a big surge in the... You got to understand something about the 90s, folks. When the internet became a thing, and you had all these like fan sites like Ain't It Cool News and all that, back in the day, these sites were a huge deal. Now everything is YouTube and whatnot, and message boards. But back then, these websites were like dens where like people would just really... Oh, I love this movie, and we're all discovering people from all over the world that love the same stuff we do, and we thought that we were the only ones that like this stuff. Turns out there's millions of people like us that loved movies like The Last Starfighter or Tron or things like that, and the advent of DVD, which I have right here. John has this wonderful...
Yep. It's the original DVD.
1999.
Over 20 years old, and I was watching it the other day, and
I love this poster.
It's great.
You
want to talk about Grig's makeup? How? When I saw his makeup, because a year later, the movie Enemy Mines came out.
Enemy Mine.
And Louis Gossett Jr. was in the makeup.
I love that.
But I didn't realize...
Here. Let's see.
Yeah.
I pulled it out a little bit earlier. Enemy Mine.
He sort of has similar makeup.
I gotta see this again. I don't remember the makeup of about this movie. I bought it on DVD and never watched it.
He was a big stage actor. He was in Robinson Crusoe, and he was in a couple of movies, and another use of an old time actor in the movie. 80s. And then of course years later you would see him in RoboCop.
Oh, RoboCop!
He's the one who tells
you're fired. That movie is great. RoboCop is one of the greatest movies ever made.
He's also the father of Brad in Superman 3.
Brad is... Let me tell you something about Brad in Superman 3. But Brad, Gavin O'Hurley, is the son of Daniel O'Hurley. Now, Gavin O'Hurley, why do we love him? There's 3 big reasons. I mean, we love him because he's a great actor. Whatever you see him in, he's really good. He's in Willow, and he's great in Willow.
Yeah.
Superman 3 is a movie that we love and don't love at the same time. There's a lot of things wrong with it.
But part of it,
but part of it is like I saw this when I was like 4 and I grew up with it, and we used to watch it on video disc.
What are you looking at? Right.
Yeah, the Evil Superman stuff is great. When Evil Superman fights himself, that like why couldn't the whole movie? It's like you watch that one scene in Star Trek V where they're showing all the pain of the characters. You're like, why can't the rest of the movie be this awesome? What was I saying?
He was in a 3rd movie that...
Oh, one of our favorites.
Death Wish 3.
Death Wish 3. And I love the original Death Wish, even though I don't like a lot of the ideas behind it, and I think that it's a bit of a damaging film, but I think that was the point. The point was you were not supposed to love what Paul Kersey was doing. You were supposed to really be disturbed by what he was doing and going after these bad guys, even though hey, he's gotten results. At the same time, you knew it wasn't good. Death
Wish 3 was more of like,
it's just
a
it was
out
canon films, and it was like when he runs out at the end, he's just got the Browning and he's just mowing down all these bad guys. I'm like, this is horrible, but I love it.
But you killed a giggler, man.
How old were we when we watched Death Wish 3? We won't say.
You killed a giggler.
I saw Death Wish 3 when I was about 6 years old. What happened was a friend of the family, we were over their house just chilling, and he says, oh, we're going to watch Death Wish 3. And I'm like,
we're going to watch Death Wish 3.
I don't think I'm allowed to watch Death Wish 3. I'm only 6. And he's like, oh, it's fine. It's PG. And I was watching, and I remember even as a 6-year-old saying, they can get away with a lot in PG these days. And It was not PG at all. And watching Death Wish 3 now, I couldn't even probably give it an R rating because there's some rough stuff in there with Sirtis and God, there's a terrible scene in there where she's attacked by the bad guys, and the violence is insane. But I still love it. I mean, it's a shocking, crazy
just one
film.
of those movies. You know?
But we used to watch so many violent,
those
crazy
Cannon movies.
Was
Delta Force also?
Delta Force was a Cannon movie. Delta Force was one.
I mean, I think Cannon was my favorite studio in the 80s.
They made so many great movies. Did you ever see Electric Boogaloo, the documentary?
I gotta see it.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's great. So the cult following of films like Blade Runner, The Thing, Scarface, The Last Starfighter, it was also helped that Universal was doing really nice special editions. See, that's another thing that you guys in the age of streaming don't get. Mm-hmm. You don't really get too many great releases anymore. You don't get them. You get like, it goes straight to HBO Max, it goes straight to Disney Plus. If it does come out, it has very minimal extras. It's very boring. You know why? Not a lot of people are buying physical media anymore unless it's from Arrow or Criterion or the boutique releases. The problem with the boutique releases are I am broke as Felix Unger. That's how broke I am. I can't afford $40 for Raging Bull in 4K, even with the sale, and it's on sale. Right now, the Criterion sale, as we record this, is going on. And it's half off the Criterion collection and the Arrow collection. So I'm like, well, I want to go into that Barnes & Noble, just kick the door open and buy Donnie Darko and American Werewolf in London. And for Criterion, I want to get the 4Ks of Double Indemnity and Raging Bull. But I noticed that even at $20, even at half price, I can't go spending $60, $100, $150 on DVDs anymore. I just can't do it. But they're going to bring out Blowout in 4K too. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But you know what it is? I gotta be good. I gotta save my money. I have so many other things to, priorities that I can't go spend. Yeah, the Last Starfighter. Well, I did get that during one of the Arrow sales. I had to get the Last Starfighter. I got the Last Starfighter last time.
Beautiful set.
Oh, it's great. You should. I'll lend to you. But the Last Starfighter and Arrow I bought like last year during the half off sale, and I'm like, okay, well I gotta have these two. I mean, I really want American Werewolf in London, and I really want Donnie Darko.
American Werewolf in London.
American Werewolf in London. You know what they got in 4K? Well, American Werewolf has just been released in 4K, and I never even got the Blu-ray, so it would be great to have that. RoboCop just came out in 4K, and I'm like, oh,
Drop it.
Man. The first RoboCop I bought on DVD, the director's cut, because I had never seen the director's cut till the DVD came out. Sorry, folks, we'll get back in a minute.
We'll get back.
Just do whatever you have to do if you got to pay bills or something.
If you smoke, if you got them.
When I bought RoboCop on DVD for the first time, which is somewhere around here.
Have a glass of water.
Yeah, there it is. This guy was $40 back in the 90s. This Criterion collection, RoboCop. But, I never seen the director's cut. The director's cut blew my mind because it had a lot of extra cool, real violent scenes that were cut. And you know what's great? The great thing about DVD collecting is that people don't realize is, yeah, you can get the 4K, yeah, you can stream it, but it's so cool to just go to a shelf and say, hey, I haven't seen this movie in a long time. It's been a long time since I watched Basket Case. Basket Case is great, but we'll
get back to Basket Case.
The afterlife of this film. Again, the cult following. So much of a cult following that there was actually a group that staged a musical of The Last Starfighter. I believe it was 2006 or 7. Somehow we got wind of it, and we actually went to the city to see it. And, at the time we gave them credit because, we said, hey, this takes a lot of guts. Like, these guys are actually doing a musical of The Last Starfighter. I want to support them. It was an off-Broadway.
Very off. It was in Newark.
No, it wasn't in Newark. It was somewhere in the very far from Broadway, though. But it was. I liked it at the time because I thought, well, I give them credit for doing this, and I says, let me see if it's on YouTube. It's got to be on YouTube. It's not on YouTube, but the soundtrack is on YouTube, and I listened again, and I'm so sorry, friends. I did not like it. You guys can listen to it. Check it out. You may think differently than me. This is just my opinion. It's not the truth. It's my opinion. But it's not good. Did you listen to it recently?
I haven't listened to it recently.
Oh.
I might have.
It hurts.
I might have saved as a souvenir. I might have saved one of the programs from that.
So. I have one liner. But let's talk about the regular musical score by Craig Safan, if I'm saying it right. Now he talked about on the Arrow disc. He talked about the Planets by Gustav Holst was an influence on Star Wars and Star Trek music. And if you listen to the Planets by Gustav Holst, it's incredible. It sounds just like Star Trek 6. I'm like, oh, that's where, this sounds like. And that was an influence on Star Wars because it was this big, booming, boisterous soundtrack. But he wanted to go a different route, and he looked up, I think it's Jean Sibelius, who's another great composer who I just recently got into, and he's great. And the reason what he wanted to do with his music was it had a very lush, warm feeling to it. And it was not so much the bombastic Star Wars energy. It was more of a gentle, warmer sound. And he also included a little bit of synth music in there, Nick Castle. With Craig Safan, the composer, which, again, made it a little different from John Williams. And what's great about the Last Starfighter theme is you have the big version of it during the fight scenes and during the triumph scenes. But if you listen very closely to this movie, during the little scenes, just like the little scenes of the trailer park when they have the cat jumping out of the mailbox and things, which I loved. I want to do that in a movie someday. But the music is played very gently, but it's there. And Williams does a little bit of that with Star Wars, where sometimes he'll play the theme in a gentle way, but it always gets big. Mm-hmm. Like, I like the idea that this guy made it a little smaller. And Craig Safan also composed the Cheers theme. Which we won't sing because the copyright, YouTube is watching, always watching. And the screenwriter, like I said, no, nobody knows your name. But the screenwriter said something, again, Supergrass covering the Cheers theme. Those bastards. Sorry, I don't want to curse out Supergrass. Supergrass, wherever you are, nobody cares, all right? You're one of those bands that I was just flipping through CDs in the library. I'm like, oh, let's listen to these guys and whatever. So Excalibur was a theme that the screenwriter wanted to put in this film, and the video game was Excalibur. The video game was The Sword and the Stone, and he said something about writing a sequel someday, and he said bigger is not better. Smart and emotional works every time, and that's a thing that today's movies need, because a lot of movies today have a lot of emotion. But they're not smart. They're like dumb. But it's all like a perfect example, and I'm sorry to rag on it again, but Thor: Love and Thunder is a movie that is big and emotional and really dumb, and it has no point. Like, it's not serious enough to be taken seriously, and it's not funny enough to be any fun. The first hour has a lot of laughs, especially with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Once the Guardians of the Galaxy leave this movie, the movie ends. It just drops. And when they go to visit, I don't want to give away too much because I know you haven't seen it, but you'll feel the same exact way as I do. When they go to visit Zeus in the middle of this movie, I really felt like I was watching like the Clash of Titans and the Fifth Element, like, mixed, and they had all these different gods and all these different characters, and then they had like the giant dumpling from that Pixar short Bao. He shows up, and I'm like, what the hell am I watching? Like, there's so many serious, deadly serious things in this movie, and then there's all these jokes and these yucks. And let me tell you something about Marvel humor. Bad Bob Hope is how I classify it. Without Robert Downey Jr. and the Guardians of the Galaxy, most of the jokes in Marvel are bad Bob Hope. Not Bob Hope in To Be or Not to Be, or when he was great, but like when he would do those TV specials in the 70s and into the 80s when it was just really not funny.
Well, is Jeff Goldblum in this? Or?
No, he's not in it.
So you don't have Jeff Goldblum, you don't have the Hulk, and you don't have Loki. So you want to make a funny Thor movie again and try and recapture what you had in Ragnarok, but that's my only review that I could say, and I haven't even seen the movie.
Ragnarok is my favorite Marvel movie.
But with Last Starfighter, I think the things that happen in that
what movie is that?
Well, I don't know. I think we saw it a few years ago. But the thing about Last Starfighter, and this is a great segue into what we're talking about humor. The way they use humor in here, with the beta unit,
the robot that looks like Alex but isn't Alex.
Yeah, the beta unit. I says, and there's a lot of stuff that has been lifted. Now we've seen in Star Trek, and we've seen in different things where they'll have the mirror universe. They'll have the multiverse, which they call it today. They have the mirror universe, so they'll have like Enemy Within, where you see True Kirks or this and that. But yes, in Star Wars they have cloning, but it's usually just the one character they cloned or whatever. But you didn't see a clone or a beta Luke Skywalker. Well, I guess if you count Rey. But
Beta
I'm sorry,
Ray.
I shouldn't have said that.
Back to Thor.
Beta Ray.
No, we won't talk about Beta Ray Bill.
But it's another... like actually that's an insult to Beta Alex.
Well, they didn't call him
Beta
Skywalker, but they
Alex,
sure as hell cloned Palpatine.
Well, that's true. They did clone Palpatine. But anyway, Beta, I says it would be great if Alex's name was Max, because then you'd have Beta Max.
Sony would have sued them for it.
But anyway, what I loved about those scenes is that the great stuff between Lewis and Beta Alex.
Yes.
And we haven't really talked too much about, we talked about Centauri and Grig because for me, I think they're the standout characters. But Lance Guest did a great job in this movie.
Yes.
And you really see, I love movies that let actors be actors. And he's done stage work, he's done different things. The thing about Lance Guest is that he shows such a range in this movie, that he could be serious, he could be dramatic. And Catherine Mary Stewart, is it?
Yes.
Catherine Mary Stewart. I always say Mary Catherine Stewart, or no. Anyway,
I kept saying Mary Stewart Masterson.
Yeah, Mary Stewart.
And then I looked at the IMDb and I'm like, oh, change that.
And she actually, I think she was on Days of Our Lives. So she had soap opera.
She would do Days of Our Lives during the day. And then like Michael J. Fox would go to the Back to the Future set from Family Ties. He would drive an hour to the other set and have basically sleep for that 1 hour. And he would do all night on Back to the Future during the early scenes at night. And then he would have to go back, work 12 hours on Family Ties. But she had a similar thing where she'd work all day long on Days of Our Lives. And then she'd go to the set of The Last Starfighter and work until basically sunrise for all those nighttime scenes.
Yeah.
That takes a lot. I know she was young, but that's a lot of work.
And she's great in this. And I really believe that love story. And, it's really a heartwarming thing at the end. And I love when she says, "I love you, Alex Rogan."
I love that part.
Because it's like, she believes in this cause now. And she's basically drawn into the thing. Quick note about the guy who had the pickup truck when they have sadly the scene where Beta Alex has to leave us. But
spoilers.
the scene I don't want to I think it's
Rosebud.
But anyway, but that pickup truck was owned by the guy, the actor who plays like the guy with I think he was wearing a cowboy hat.
Yeah, I think so.
He's Brian from
V.
Yeah,
really.
I saw him in an interview later.
V is fantastic.
That's
the best science fiction movie of the 80s. The one from 1983. I love The Final Battle, but the one from 83, I didn't like it as much as The Final Battle when I was a kid. But as I've gotten older, I saw it maybe again when I was a teenager, and I said, they're both great, but V from 1983 is probably the best sci-fi movie of the 80s.
That's another thing that's hard to watch today, because I'm like, it's too much like our
world. Much like real life.
It's too much like our world.
It really is. I'm
seeing a lot of kids like Daniel in that show. And no offense, Daniel. But it's like Daniel in that show, but that's a subject for another time.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so Brian was in it. But just the play of the actors and with Beta Alex, you really feel for his character. Now, from what I heard, was that they did reshoots with the Beta Alex.
Yeah,
and he had cut a lot of his hair, and so they had to wear a wig. And I heard he had like 102 or 103 fever when he did that laughing scene. It sounded like Tomix and Zima, but no. He was like, so anyway, but he was like, I love that scene.
That was an addition.
Me, I think those comic points work because you need a little bit lightheartedness and stuff thrown in there, but it's not like every 5 seconds.
Well, you know what too? It was funny and it was just short enough where it didn't outstay its welcome.
Yeah. It
wasn't like these long movies of today. All today's movies are so long. They're all 2.5 hours. God help us.
And I heard he was really sick during those scenes, but you know what? It's okay that the Betamax. Now I'm going to say Betamax forever.
Yes, that's it. We have to cut.
Beta Alex is like he looks different, and I think that works for the film because he's the Beta Alex. He's not, Alex. So I
Yeah.
think that those scenes work for me. And some people say, well, it's sort of like it doesn't really work because I want to get back to space. To me, I think the stuff on Earth is so interesting.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of what people don't realize too is that people say that there's not a lot of character development in those scenes, but there is for the other characters, and you got to see a little bit more of their insight with Alex and how they relate to him, and how they respond to him, and how they just always expect him to act a certain way, and the minute he starts to act a little weird, everybody's like so freaked out by that. Like, wait, this guy's acting different today. Like, what's wrong with him? And yeah, when she says I love you, Alex Rogan, I used to think that was really corny as a kid. But you watch it now all these years later, and it's just, this movie is very sweet. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's such a nice movie. And I love the Star Wars movies, but what I love so much about the original Star Wars that we've never had since, because Empire Strikes Back, boom, he gets his hand cut off, I'm your father, all this stuff, it's really heavy, quickly. But what I like about this movie is it reminds me a lot of the original Star Wars, where there was an innocence to it. Like, you watch the original Star Wars as a kid before you see the sequels, and you watch the original Star Wars and you're like, well, gee, this could go anywhere. This could be any kind of movie. We don't know who Darth Vader is. We don't know what really happened. We find all that out in Empire Strikes Back. Empire Strikes Back says, this is what Star Wars is, and this is the direction Star Wars is going to go in for the rest of its existence. But when you just watch the original movie by itself, it's just its own world unto itself. And that's why I like that one the best. And that's one of the things I love about Last Starfighter is that it's not so much in a hurry to have any big revelations or any big heavy drama or anything like that. It's just a very simple, sweet movie. And if there were sequels, I'm sure they could have gone in any direction. And that's part of the fun, though, is that when you see a movie that you like and it doesn't have a sequel, you always kind of think to yourself, gee, what would have happened next? And that's what I love about John Carpenter, and Nick Castle is one of his disciples. You watch the end of a John Carpenter movie, and then, Tommy Lee Wallace, who's also one of Carpenter's guys, or Nick Castle, you watch a Carpenter movie, and when it ends, it always ends with some kind of a twist or some kind of a surprise, and you walk out of Escape from New York or The Big Trouble in Little China or any one of his movies, The Thing, even The Thing, as dark as it is, you walk out of that movie saying, now what? Like, what happens now? And my favorite is probably They Live. When it's revealed that these aliens, oh God, if there's a movie that's about today, it's They Live.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man.
I see it in memes all the time with the sunglasses and taking off the sunglasses.
The best fight in movies, probably Keith David and
Roddy
Piper. But with They Live has a wonderful ending.
Great lines,
In the Mouth of Madness has an ending like that too. You're like, what happens now? And you walk out of the theater, you're making up your own movie in your head. And almost all Carpenter's movies have that. And that's a great gift of cinema, of not only you enjoying and entertaining this movie, but you walk out saying, well, gee, I wonder what happens next. Whereas you walk out of most movies today and you're like, well, I'm glad that's over.
Yeah.
And I feel that way about even movies that I like recently. Like, I did enjoy Doctor Strange, but I felt like when it was over, I felt like, well, I'm relieved I can go home now. Mm-hmm. And even the new Batman, I love it and everything. And I thought it was a great movie, but I have no desire to go back and watch it again. Like, I'm thinking, gee, I would like to see that new Batman again. I'm like, oh, it's 3 hours though.
Yeah, it's like
3 hours.
And I enjoyed it, but I'm like, to me, I think we've already seen the beginning with, Christian Bale and that trilogy. Like, to me, when it comes to Batman on film, and I'm not counting the animated stuff because he was good in animated stuff, even though I don't like the movie. But not counting the animated stuff for Batman on film, to me, it's Batman '89 and the Nolan trilogy.
Yeah.
I mean, I did like the Batman. Don't get me wrong, but
again, I haven't had a desire and there were things I really loved in the new Spider-Man. I did like the movie a lot, but even that one I haven't watched again. I saw it in the theater and I bought the digital of all the movies. But do you realize too that the '80s movies had a replay value? And it wasn't just because we were kids. I don't think, maybe it is, but I don't think it was because we were kids, and I don't think it was because there wasn't much else to do, so we'd watch The Last Starfighter for the 10th time or something like that. I just think that movies, these classic movies of the 70s and 80s that we grew up with, just had a replay value where it's like, I want to watch Star Wars again. I want to watch Indiana Jones again.
Yeah.
Whereas today, even movies that I really enjoy, I'm not in a big rush to revisit. Like if I see a movie and then I watch it again in the same year, like it must be a movie I really loved.
Yeah.
And I have not seen one movie this year, and I liked Elvis, and I liked The Batman, and I liked Doctor Strange, and a couple of others, but not one of them do I really feel like watching again right now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like in the old days, if we loved a movie, we'd go see it 2 times, we'd go see it 3 times. And there's very few movies today that you can say that about.
And there's just like, you know, like a movie like Last Starfighter, it's the characters, it's the story, it's the way they interact. I mean, even the kid actor in this Lewis has some of the greatest comedic scenes in the movie.
Yeah,
and one scene that, you know, I was talking about with Beta Alex, we were mentioning earlier, we were talking earlier, and I said he has a scene where he's like, save the whales and not the universe, huh? And I thought 2 years later, the Star Trek crew saves the whales and the universe. So just...
The Voyage Home. They
did it in memory of Beta Alex, so... But we haven't even talked about the villains in this film, and you know we have Zur.
Starleague. I love that.
Well, we did talk about the Kodans.
What do you think about their haircuts? That was pretty bad. The haircuts were weird. There's people from Ilos.
They were kind of weird.
But I think that was supposed to be a thing like they
Quaker
were.
Oats.
You know what it reminded?
Or something.
Well, it reminded me of This Island Earth, where Exeter had that big forehead and he had the white hair. But in this, it was like, I think it was like they had these big brains and, you know, I don't know, it was a weird look. But again, it was interesting because it was really felt like something different from what was out there. And one of the people in the cast that we haven't talked about, and I feel bad that I didn't wrote her name, I just called her Granny. The lady that plays Granny in this movie may look
with
familiar.
The shotgun.
With the shotgun. Granny may look familiar to Star Trek fans because she was one of the Telosians from the pilot episode of Star Trek, The Cage. And I'm like, get out. I read that on IMDb, and I'm watching the movie closely, and there's one scene where she makes like a certain face at Alex. I'm like, oh my God, she was from Star Trek. Like, I saw this lady. Because they did something weird with that, where I think one of the ladies, they had like a man's voice, but it was a lady. It was very weird, the pilot for Star Trek. We didn't see it. It didn't get released until probably the late 80s. I think 87 or 88 was the first time it aired on television. The only thing we saw of The Cage was from the Menagerie, which used a lot of footage. Very smart and savvy to save some money. On Gene Roddenberry's part, they repurposed the footage from The Cage.
Yeah, I love how I feel bad for Captain Pike, but he ends up in that chair, and it's sort of like, you know, he has yes or no.
Well, that's probably coming on Strange New Worlds. I haven't watched it yet, but Star Trek is sort of like Star Wars now, in my opinion. It's kind of like, I'll watch it, I'll check it out, but you know what? To me, everything is extra with Star Wars and Star Trek. To me, the Star Wars, the canon, the original films, and I would include the prequels up to and including the Clone Wars, everything with Lucas. After Lucas, it's all spin-offs and extra. And some of it is good extra. Like, I love Rogue One. I do like the sequels, and I love Obi-Wan too. But even Obi-Wan, as good as it is, it just doesn't feel like Lucas made Star Wars.
And there's just too much filler. There's a lot of... you know, there's just a lot of filler, and it's like, let's get to the meat and potatoes of, you know, what's going on.
Well, they just stretch it out, and they let everybody live, and they kill characters, and they bring characters back, and, well, they bring back characters from the dead all the time, just not the ones you want brought back.
Exactly.
Like, I want Han Solo back, and I want Luke Skywalker back, and God rest her, Carrie Fisher.
I want my father back, you said.
Yeah, from Princess Bride. But
hello, my name is...
Yeah, oh, that's a great one too. But that was a criterion I had to get, because I know that's a movie I'm going to watch.
I think the biggest... All I can say about Disney Star Wars is this. The biggest opportunity to put the original cast in one scene together.
Yeah.
Looking back now, I mean, it's been 10 years. Mm-hmm. In October of 2012 was when Lucas signed over to Disney. And looking back over these 10 years, I'm saying, if they would have done something that they just had them reunited in one scene, get the original cast, Han, Leia.
Well, you know who would
Luke,
have done that?
Lando Calrissian. Get everybody back.
Yes.
And if they says, okay, now 500 years later, I wouldn't mind that. Just get them back for a scene and say things are going good in the New Republic and stuff, and then just fast forward into the future and stuff like that. That's all I want to see. I wanted to see a reunion.
It should have been set like 1,000 years beyond.
And you could make all the shows like, and I think it's cool to use Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen in a show and everything.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's cool to use the actors because they would be around the same age that they were, when they were, Darth Vader. It's funny. It's like watching. I was born the year Star Wars came out, and watching the original Star Wars and thinking, I'm probably about the same age as Darth Vader during this.
Yeah.
Like when he's coming in.
If Rogue One has taught us anything, new Star Wars needs more tragedies. Now, I don't mean like killing off Han Solo, killing off Luke, or killing off, because that was more like, well, what else are we going to do? Might as well kill these guys.
No, you know what it needs? It needs Darth Vader.
Well, it does. But like, for example, Obi-Wan, and we're going to spoil Obi-Wan. The ending of Obi-Wan was simply this. Fine with the girl coming back and know she should have been killed off. The Sith girl and everything. Sister. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with her coming back, and then I'm fine with her finding redemption. However, I still think it would have been cool if her character died. But in a way that was completely random and a surprise. Like, I would have loved it if she was about to kill Luke and then she stopped herself and she threw down her saber. And you know what would have been cool? Sand people being sand people again and jumping out of the sand and grabbing her and pulling her down into the sand. And that would have been it. Because you know what it is? We got to make the sand people bad again.
Well, like a bantha steps on.
Well, the thing with Star Wars is that it's like every time you see Star Wars, they remove
and
more.
She becomes bantha.
They remove more fangs from Star Wars with each passing Disney property. Boba Fett's got some fangs. They've got to come out, and they take out Boba Fett, and he has no fangs.
Even
now.
Tamora Morrison says it.
It's not bad Boba Fett doing bad Boba Fett stuff. It's just kind of like really tame and really, and then like even like with these new, and I like Obi-Wan a lot, but I just feel like, again, give Star Wars some teeth. And I don't mean make it rated R and anything like that, but just give it some edge. And they're not doing that.
It's just not going to happen in the current climate and stuff. It's just
not
now.
Not
what I realized the other day? Thinking about Disney Star Wars, and I'm sorry, we'll get that list.
Marvel, weirder is not
Marvel,
better.
Disney, Star Wars, all these things. When we were growing up, when we were kids, we'd see movies made by Lucas and Spielberg and all these great guys.
Real auteurs.
But the thing is, they were like, they could be our dads. They were older than us. And now we're seeing stuff like Obi-Wan written by these kids in their 20s and 30s. No offense to any of your 20 and 30-year-olds. I'm just saying, it's like written by people younger than us. And I'm like, you don't know the lore. You don't know the thing. It's like, I was there back in the original.
There's a generation gap, for sure.
And I'm not putting down.
What do you think of Jurassic Park?
God bless you. I wish you all the best.
Well, let me just ask you a question. Like, what do you think of Jurassic Park? Just give me your honest opinion about Jurassic Park.
Like the first one is very exciting. It was groundbreaking for its time. Just like, Last Starfighter was groundbreaking for its time.
Is it your favorite movie? Is it one of your real favorite movies?
Well, I know people who are like, this is my, like one of their favorite movies because they saw it as a kid. They saw it as things. But it's like, it's not on the level of something like a Raiders, if that's
Jaws.
what you're getting at. No.
That's what I mean. I'm the same. It's not a bad
it's
film.
It's like 3.5 stars. The first one is like 3.5 stars. It's well made. It's great
It's very
cast.
good. But you know what I'm saying? It's like...
But it's not on the level of...
People that grew up that are a little younger than us. People that grew up that are a little younger than us hold that in a regard that we don't have for that movie.
Yeah.
Like the way we look at Jaws or Star Wars is the way they see Jurassic Park. And I'm going to get a little worse here. Independence Day. Yeah. Or The Fifth Element. Or movies... That
movie I almost walked out of, but I was just so floored.
We couldn't because there was too many people and we couldn't even move, and that it was sold out. Fifth Element, we hated it. But like, you know what I'm saying? It's
Daily News gave it 4 stars.
No, Bernard, but she was right on about Pulp Fiction. She was great at that, which is a great movie. But you know what it is? The thing, the way that I see it is that, people of our generation, we like these movies. We enjoy these movies. We don't revere them as classics, though.
No.
But there's a lot of people that like a lot of stuff that's a little bit lesser and a lot lesser that they revere as their favorite movies and the movies that inspired them. Now, the problem is those guys that grew up that love these movies, that some of them we liked, some of them we're not fans of, now they're making all the movies. The problem is we are thinking of a better movie and a better show as we're watching the movie. And we're watching the movie play out and saying, man, it would be really cool if this happened. And then it doesn't happen. And you feel sort of like, oh man, it would have been so much cooler if they did this. And I went through that when I saw the last James Bond. And recently I watched it again, or bits of it, like the last hour. I just wanted to see if I had the same opinion. And I liked it even less when I saw it again. I'm watching this James Bond movie, and I'm like...
my wife about it. She hadn't seen the movie,
Oh,
but she found out through an internet post. That
stupid and nonsense.
She found that through our news feed about James Bond, and I'm like, and she's a big James Bond fan. And she was, and especially the Daniel Craig ones she really likes. And
we actually
started, I think we started dating when the original one came out, and I think we saw Casino Royale
in the
three
theaters.
of us. Me, my wife,
it was amazing,
and Dan.
And it was all for nothing.
And it was
because
just like
basically,
it was such a great reboot or whatever,
Yeah, but they were always
movie.
heavy. They were always dark, and they were always really like powerful. But this was just a bummer, and not only is it a bummer, it ruined all that great work. It was all for nothing, basically. Yeah. Including two of the best James Bond movies ever made. Casino Royale and Skyfall are probably some of the best James Bonds you'll ever see. But I think that, to me, James Bond ends with Spectre. Because I think from this point on, and Spectre's not a bad film, but to me, that's the end of James Bond for me. And I don't think I'm going to see another one. Because why bother? Let's watch 4 movies with this guy, and then they'll do the same thing. And I never want to see that. I never want to go through that again. I'm a James Bond fan. I love all the films. I have the box set back there. Everything from Dr. No to Skyfall. And I don't want to go any further. I think I've seen enough James Bond films in my life, and I want to see James Bond. I'll rewatch a good one. Yeah, basically. But Zur, we were talking about.
Oh, Zur.
On the last episode of Mostly Movies.
On the last episode. Well, I think when we put this on YouTube, we should write Last Starfighter. Yeah,
and every other movie that's ever been made in the history of cinema.
And like Disney Star Wars and everything like that. We'll put it in there. But Zur, actually, the part of Zur was almost, I think they were considering Robin Williams for the part. So I could just imagine weird. Like him talking to Greg, and he's like,
oh God,
I want you to make me a woman.
And
Greg is like, weird. Honey, I'm so happy.
No, that would have been bad. But but Zur was a great villain, and again, I like the idea that this was a guy that this was something that we never saw in the Rebel Alliance. Like we never saw like somebody that had turned bad, and we don't even know why they turned bad or what the circumstances.
Well, and another play with Star Wars is that you had, in Star Wars, it's the father that was bad, and then the son is trying to redeem the father, and in this one you have the father that's good, and then the rebellious son who turns against him. But there's a lot of stuff, like, seeing it again, it was an hour and 40 minutes. I says, if maybe they added like 20 minutes more, or maybe 10 minutes more, of just like a little more embellishment of the villain and everything.
It just seems
of course he escapes. I love that scene when he's escaping and they have that guy fall inside on.
Yeah, well, you know what the thing is that's funny is that you could tell that right off the bat that the Kodans hate this guy, and he just has no idea that they can't stand him. But they immediately hate him, and they're really just using him to get through there. They're like, gonna basically, they'll get rid of him as soon as they can. They're just kind of, doing this, and that should have been established more. Why he should have been a little bit more menacing, and he should have had some kind of like, instead of just having a scepter with a blade that he never really uses on anybody, it would have been cool if he at least made an example of someone, so you could say, okay, this dude is bad. Like, see Darth Vader. Right in the beginning of the movie, he's choking this dude. You're like, okay, this guy's obviously not a nice guy. Something like that would have worked.
Vader makes that interesting.
But then what happens to
some crazy Quaker.
The Star League is wiped out, and Alex and Greg are the last two left.
I always wanted to be one going against the whole drama.
But then they do this hide and seek thing, which it's a good thing he played hide and seek with Alex and not Mumbly Peg, because then the whole universe would have been destroyed by the Kodan Armada. So basically what happens is they wait for the ship to pass, they use Death Blossom, and that's the end of the Kodan warship, which is surprising that it's really only one ship, basically. But Zur escapes because I guess they were leaving it open for a sequel. The movie did respectable, but not enough to warrant a sequel. The reviews were mixed. I think Gene Siskel liked it. Ebert was kind of like a little, he was usually good, but he was sometimes that he was a little rough on movies that didn't really deserve it. And this was a case where I think he was being a little harsh.
And I think this movie opened the same weekend that Ghostbusters came out. Oh. So, it was just... Ghostbusters was like juggernaut.
Summer of '84 was rough, man, because you had Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was in May.
I remember seeing Ghostbusters in the movie.
I saw
Ghostbusters and Temple of Doom in the movie.
Wow, Ghostbusters.
And Temple of Doom was like,
especially then. I mean, it's great to see it
at
now.
my age. I was a little kid, and it's like actually the scene that really sicked me out wasn't the heart pulling out; it was the
monkey brains,
the bug scenes.
Oh, the bugs.
Well, monkey brains.
That part's rough, really rough. But it was a good summer for movies. There were so many movies. Also, shortly after, people realized that Gremlins was supposed to be a Christmas movie. And then they decided to move it to the summer because Warner Brothers didn't have a big movie to go up against Indiana Jones and Ghostbusters and all this stuff. So it was a very crowded summer, but it was also a time for movies where movies would play 5, 6, 7 months. So if you didn't see Gremlins for a month, there was no on-demand 1 month later. You would just go see Gremlins 1 or 2 months later. And then they even had discount theaters back in the day, which you don't have anymore. Sadly, I would love to see more of those. Mm-hmm. But any final thoughts on The Last Starfighter? Or am I jumping the gun here?
Well, I love, that to me, the one of my favorite scenes is the last scene when they land in the trailer park.
Yeah,
and Maggie's deciding whether she should go and what she should do, and they just have that scene where she joins him, because earlier in the scene, when he goes into Centauri's car. Now this came out a year before Back to the Future, but the car is very similar to DeLorean looking, and when it takes off and flies. Now this is a few years before the DeLorean flies in Back to the Future too.
Oh yeah,
but. One thing, I'll leave this last thought with Last Starfighter. There's that scene when he's deciding whether he wants to go into Centauri's car. And you see this with the DeLorean where, Marty, has to jump into the DeLorean and take off. And then also in a movie Transformers, I know it's a corny movie, but there's a scene in the original Transformers movie where he says to the character, it's like,
Who are you?
Are you going to... Well, no, I'm just saying, are you... But I thought about this again when I was watching Last Starfighter.
I love Bumblebee, though.
Well, no, he says the scene to the Megan Fox character, Sheila LaBeouf. He's like, are you going to look back on your life and decide, would I ever get into this car? And it's like, this could change your life by getting into this car.
Wow.
You're going to look back at this moment and say, should I have done it, or regret it if you don't? And I thought of that line. I know it's a corny movie, Transformers and everything like that, silly movie. But I thought of that line when I saw Last Starfighter, that was the one that changed his life. The interesting thing about Alex and Luke was that Luke realized that, literally what happened to Owen and Beru. He's like, there's nothing for me here now. But Alex had his second thoughts. And thank God he did, because then all the things happened with the Armada and everything like that. But anyway, he had his second thoughts. He was pulling back because he wasn't ready to take on that responsibility. Mm-hmm. But then when they says, look, they're going to keep coming for you. And they're going to come for your family, and they're going to come for everything. So he's like, I got to do this.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, do you go into the car or do you not? That's the life-changing moment. Mm-hmm. And I think I thought of Transformers, but I thought of Back to the Future. And I thought of a lot of movies that are like rite of passage movies. Think of a movie like American Graffiti.
Yes.
Do you get in the car, hanging out with your friends? Do you, you know what I'm saying? It's like Dazed and Confused is another one. Rite of passage movies where that young person takes that step. Am I going to, and it's really the essential storyline of a movie. It's like, do I make that step into the next dimension?
Yeah. And these stories are old stories. Literally, Once and Future King, which inspired this movie in some way, is cobbling together of the Arthurian legends from England, from Germany, from different places. And the author, White, put them all together. and made one story. And yeah, these are very classical stories, and that's why they endure, because that's another thing we talked about too, and this is the final thought that I'll leave you guys with. The people that made the movies that you've seen in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s, of course they watched movies, of course they watched some TV, but they also read a lot more. And it wasn't just about the latest bestseller, it was about reading the classics and learning and just picking up all they could. And the books that they taught them in school were better too. The books they teach now, it's just like whatever. But like back then, they had to read, like even when we were in middle school, we were reading Of Mice and Men. We were reading Tennessee Williams and all that. And it changed in high school, thanks Clinton, to like books that were just basically completely unrelatable, completely uninteresting, and they weren't really written by real writers. We weren't reading Hemingway in high school. We were reading a lot of junk. But what I did do in high school, and this is what you kids have got to learn, I hung out in that school library and I found the books. You know, the books that really, like Dune or things like that I read, and I'm like, these books are just blowing my mind, and the books my teachers are giving me aren't interesting. But learn things for yourselves and think for yourselves. Don't just go along with the crowd, because if Alex Rogan went along with the crowd, he would have never left Starlite, Starbrite. Okay.
The place where Alex and Maggie left for the stars.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. All right, guys, so we'll see you soon. We'll talk about more movies. Thank you for listening. And those of you that have made it to the end, much like Saw, you know, we'll be very grateful that you're still alive and that you survived this ordeal. So we'll be back with more videos, you know, when we can. And we'll talk to you guys soon, all right? Have a great night. Thanks.